It was early morning and the city streets were already bustling with people rushing to work. Cars honked, street vendors shouted their goods, and the sounds of daily life filled the air. In the midst of all this chaos, a young nurse walked briskly down the sidewalk, her worn shoes tapping lightly on the pavement. She carried a small bag, nothing fancy, just the essentials she needed for the day. Even though her face carried the fatigue of many sleepless nights, her eyes held a quiet determination. Just a few days ago, her world had been turned upside down. She had received a notice from the hospital where she had worked for years. The hospital had decided to downsize, and she, along with several other staff members, had been let go. She remembered the sinking feeling as she read the letter, the way her hands trembled slightly and the emptiness that followed. Losing a job was never easy, especially for someone who had dedicated her life to caring for others. Her apartment was small and modest, a single room that barely fit her bed and a small kitchen corner. Bills were piling up, and she often worried about how she would pay rent, electricity, and other necessities. Every month seemed like a balancing act between keeping a roof over her head and ensuring she had enough to eat. Despite the struggle, she never complained. Life had taught her that strength was not just about money or comfort, but about perseverance and kindness. That morning, as she walked past the busy streets, her mind wandered to the people she had cared for during her time at the hospital. One patient in particular kept coming to her thoughts. He was a middle-aged man who had suffered a sudden medical emergency and was recovering slowly. She remembered the day he had been admitted, looking scared and confused, unsure if he would ever regain his strength. She had stayed with him, explaining every procedure, calming his fears, and cheering his small victories. Even now, without the security of a job, she felt an inner pull to continue helping him. She knew he had no family nearby and relied heavily on the hospital staff for support. Her heart ached thinking about the thought of him being alone during such a vulnerable time. The nurse decided she could not ignore him. Despite her own worries and exhaustion, she would find a way to help. By the time she reached his small apartment, the sun had begun to rise, casting a golden glow across the city. The man opened the door with a weak smile. His face showed the strain of his illness, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes when he saw her. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied, stepping inside. She looked around the small space, noticing how untidy and worn it was. It wasn't a reflection of carelessness, but of struggle. Bills and medical papers were scattered across the table, and the faint smell of medicine lingered in the air. She knew that just coming here and offering her time would mean more than anything else she could do. They spent the morning talking. She helped him organize his medications, explained the importance of each one, and reminded him of his appointments. Her presence brought him comfort, and she could see his anxiety slowly fading. Even though she had little to offer financially, her attention and care seemed to lift his spirits in a way money never could. After a few hours, she helped him with a few small chores around the apartment. They washed dishes, tidied up a corner of the room, and even made a simple breakfast together. He insisted on helping, but she gently guided him, turning the tasks into a small, light-hearted routine. They laughed together at minor accidents and shared stories from their pasts. These moments, though ordinary, were filled with warmth and connection. As the morning turned into afternoon, she realized how much time had passed. She glanced at her watch and felt a twinge of worry. She had errands to run and bills to pay, but more importantly, she had to think about how to keep herself afloat without a job. Yet seeing him smile, hearing his laughter, and noticing the relief on his face made her realize that her efforts were worthwhile. She reminded herself that kindness, even when inconvenient, was never wasted. Before leaving, she made a plan. She would return the next day and continue helping him, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort. She also thought about reaching out to some contacts who might know of opportunities for work. But for now, her focus was on him, and that focus gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since losing her job. Stepping out into the sunlight, she felt a mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. The streets were busier now, people moving with hurried steps, lost in their own concerns. Yet amidst this rush, she walked calmly, her mind and heart centered on the small but meaningful difference she was making in someone's life. As she walked back to her apartment, she reflected on her own struggles. Losing her job had been devastating, but she knew that life was unpredictable. Some days would be dark, but small acts of compassion could bring light in unexpected ways. She remembered a saying her mother had once told her, "No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." Those words resonated deeply as she thought about the morning she had spent helping the man. Back at her apartment, she sat down with a cup of tea and allowed herself a moment of rest. She thought about the upcoming days and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Rent was due, her savings were limited, and the city's cost of living seemed relentless. Yet amidst all this, she felt a quiet pride. Pride not in wealth or recognition, but in her ability to care, to make someone feel less alone in their struggle. Evening came, and the city lights flickered on, casting a soft glow across the streets. From her small window, she could see people returning home, some laughing, others lost in thought. She imagined the man she had helped now resting comfortably, feeling a little more hopeful. That thought warmed her heart and reminded her why she had chosen this path of selflessness. She also allowed herself to dream, just a little. She wondered if one day, things would turn around, if stability would return, if opportunities would come knocking when least expected. But she didn't dwell too long on what was uncertain. Instead, she focused on what she could control: kindness, patience, and determination. As she prepared for bed that night, she thought about the morning's events, feeling a sense of quiet accomplishment. Even though the day had started with worry and uncertainty, it ended with purpose and connection. She closed her eyes, tired but content, knowing that she had made a difference in someone's life, however small it might seem in the grand scheme of things. That night, as the city slept, the nurse dreamed of brighter days. She dreamed not just of financial security or job stability, but of a life where her efforts to help others were recognized in meaningful ways. Little did she know that her selflessness was about to set in motion events that would change her life forever. She didn't know it yet, but her act of kindness that day had planted a seed that would soon grow into something extraordinary, a reminder that good deeds, even in the darkest of times, never go unnoticed. And so, with hope in her heart and determination in her spirit, she drifted into sleep, unaware of the remarkable journey that awaited her in the coming days. The next morning, the nurse woke up before the sun had fully risen. The city was still quiet, and a soft chill lingered in the air. She stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her muscles, the kind that came from long days of work and sleepless nights. Despite losing her job, she felt a sense of purpose that pushed her out of bed. Today, she had a mission, and she intended to see it through. After a quick breakfast of bread and tea, she prepared her small bag and set off to the man's apartment. As she walked, she passed familiar shops and street corners, greeting the vendors with a polite nod or a soft "good morning." She didn't have much, but she always believed that kindness was free and could brighten someone else's day more than money ever could. When she arrived at his apartment, she noticed a difference immediately. The man's face looked lighter, less burdened, and there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. He greeted her with a smile that reached his whole face, not just his mouth. It was a smile that carried hope, trust, and gratitude. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I was hoping you would come today." "Of course," she replied softly, stepping inside. "I couldn't leave you on your own after yesterday." They began the morning with a small routine. She helped him take his medications on time, checking each pill carefully and making sure he understood their purpose. She also encouraged him to drink water regularly and to move around slowly, just enough to keep his muscles active without straining them. Every little step mattered, and she explained everything patiently, never rushing, never making him feel inadequate. After tending to his health, they moved to practical matters. The man had a stack of bills and documents that had been left untouched for weeks. The nurse sat down with him at the small kitchen table and started organizing everything. They sorted bills by urgency, made notes of due dates, and even created a simple plan for how to handle them. It was tedious work, but the nurse approached it with patience and care, turning what could have been stressful into a collaborative effort. At one point, the man laughed quietly at a small mistake he had made on a form. "I can't believe I almost sent this to the wrong place," he said, shaking his head. The nurse smiled warmly. "It happens to everyone. Don't worry, we'll fix it together." That laughter, soft and genuine, echoed around the small apartment. The nurse felt a wave of satisfaction. Moments like these, she realized, were why she had chosen her path in life, Helping someone find hope again, even in the smallest ways, was more rewarding than any paycheck could ever be. By late morning, the nurse suggested they take a short walk. She knew the fresh air would do him good, and it would help lift his spirits further. Outside, the sun shone warmly, birds chirped from nearby trees, and the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. As they walked slowly down the street, she noticed the man's steps were steadier than before. His posture was better, and he seemed more confident. They stopped at a small park, and he sat on a bench taking in the surroundings. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've done so much for me, even when you have your own problems." Most people would have walked away. The nurse shook her head, smiling gently. "You don't need to thank me. We all have challenges, but if we can help each other, even a little, why wouldn't we?" He looked at her with admiration, and she could see the gratitude in his eyes. It wasn't just about the help she had given. It was about the attention, the care, and the human connection. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly seen and supported. When they returned to the apartment, the nurse helped him prepare a simple lunch. They chopped vegetables together, made a small salad, and shared bread with a bit of cheese. While eating, they talked about life, memories, and dreams. The conversation was lighthearted at times, serious at others, but it was always meaningful. The man shared stories from his past, lessons he had learned, and regrets he had carried for years. The nurse listened carefully, offering words of encouragement and occasionally sharing a bit of her own life. She noticed how much he smiled now, how he seemed more relaxed and less burdened. It was a subtle change, but one that spoke volumes. Healing, she realized, was not just about medicine or treatment. It was about human connection, about feeling cared for, and about knowing someone genuinely wants the best for you. As afternoon approached, the nurse reminded him of a small task, a medical appointment he had been postponing out of fear and uncertainty. She offered to accompany him, insisting that he didn't need to face it alone. With her support, he agreed, and together they prepared for the trip. She helped him into comfortable clothes, packed a small bag with essentials, and walked with him to the taxi stand. During the ride, he expressed his gratitude again. "You really shouldn't have to do all this for me," he said softly. "You have your own life to worry about, and yet you've chosen to help me." The nurse smiled, looking out of the window at the passing city streets. "I believe we all need someone at some point. Today it's me helping you. Tomorrow it might be someone helping me. Life works in strange ways." At the clinic, she stayed by his side, ensuring he was comfortable, answering his questions and supporting him through every step of the appointment. The doctors noticed her dedication, commenting on her calm demeanor and attentive care. Even though she was no longer a hospital employee, her professionalism and compassion shone brightly. After the appointment, they returned home, tired but satisfied. The man rested while the nurse tidied up the apartment, making small improvements that made the space more comfortable. She rearranged a few items, cleaned the surfaces, and even placed a small plant near the window. It was a small gesture, but it brought a sense of life and hope into the apartment. As evening approached, the man prepared tea for both of them. They sat together quietly, savoring the warmth and comfort of the simple drink. He looked at her with a deep sense of appreciation. "You don't know how much this means to me," he said. "I've been struggling alone for so long, and you've come into my life and made it better. I don't think I could ever repay you." The nurse shook her head gently. "You don't need to repay me. Just take care of yourself and keep moving forward. That's enough." Later that night, as she walked back to her own apartment, the city had changed. Lights glimmered from windows, cars moved slowly in traffic, and the air had a quiet, calm energy. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, but also the weight of her own struggles. Losing her job was still a heavy burden, and she worried about how long she could sustain herself without steady income. Yet she didn't let fear dominate her thoughts. Instead, she reflected on the day's events. Helping someone else had reminded her of her own strength, her resilience, and her ability to make a difference, even when life seemed unfair. She realized that kindness was a choice, and it was a choice she was willing to make every day. Back in her small apartment, she prepared a simple dinner for herself. She ate quietly, thinking about the man and how far he had come in just 2 days. She felt proud of the small but meaningful role she had played in his life. The thought of the change she had sparked gave her hope, a feeling that had been rare since she lost her job. Before going to bed, She took out a small notebook she kept tucked away in her bag. In it, she wrote down her thoughts, her reflections, and the little victories of the day. She wrote about the man's smile, the laughter they shared, and the progress he had made. Writing helped her process the day and reminded her of why she chose to care for others, even when life wasn't easy for her. As she closed the notebook, she felt a quiet peace. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, both for her and for the man she was helping, but she also knew that together, with patience and determination, they could face whatever came their way. Her heart was filled with hope, not just for him, but for herself as well. That night, she fell asleep with a sense of purpose and a belief that good deeds, even when unnoticed, had a way of coming back to those who gave them freely. She didn't know it yet, but her dedication and selflessness were about to catch the attention of someone who would change her life forever. The following morning, the nurse woke up with a quiet determination. Her small apartment felt calm in the early hours, and the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window. Despite the lingering worry about bills and her job situation, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the man she was helping relied on her support, and that alone was enough to push her forward. As she stepped out into the streets, she noticed something different in the city that day. Life seemed to move with a subtle rhythm, a little slower, a little gentler. People passed by with faces focused on their own concerns, but she moved through them with a quiet awareness. Her thoughts were already with the man and what the day might bring. When she arrived at his apartment, she was greeted with a bright smile and a sense of calm that had been missing in the first days. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I feel better today." "I think yesterday really helped." The nurse returned his smile, feeling a small surge of satisfaction. "I'm glad to hear that. Today we'll continue to make things easier and more organized for you." They started with a simple morning routine, medications, water, and light exercises. She encouraged him gently, ensuring he moved safely without overexerting himself. She reminded him that recovery wasn't just physical but also emotional and mental. It was about building confidence and hope, little by little. Afterwards, they returned to the paperwork and bills. Yesterday's efforts had already made a noticeable difference, but there was still more to organize. As they sorted through the documents, a small envelope fell from the stack. Inside was a letter from a family member or friend he hadn't contacted in years. He opened it hesitantly, and his expression changed as he read. The letter spoke of concern and relief, of someone who had been worried about him and was now grateful to know he was doing better. The nurse watched quietly, giving him space, and saw how much this connection lifted his spirits. For someone who had felt isolated for so long, the small gesture of communication from a loved one was a reminder that he was not entirely alone. Throughout the morning, she continued to help him with practical tasks. She showed him how to set reminders for his medications, how to track his bills, and even offered tips on managing simple household chores more efficiently. Each time he made progress, she encouraged him with a warm word or a small gesture of praise. Her approach was never condescending. It was always supportive, respectful, and patient. By late morning, the nurse suggested they take another short walk outside. This time, she wanted him to experience a little of the world beyond the walls of his apartment and the small routines of his recovery. The sunlight was warmer now, and the city streets were busier. They walked slowly, observing the surroundings, and she pointed out small details: a flower blooming near a doorway, the cheerful chatter of street vendors, the way sunlight reflected on a nearby building. "It's easy to forget these little things when life gets overwhelming," she said softly. "Sometimes noticing them can make a day feel lighter." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I never realized how much I had been missing. It's like I've been stuck in one place for so long, and now I'm finally noticing the world again." They spent a little time at a small park, sitting on a bench in silence. He seemed more relaxed than ever, and she could see a subtle change in his posture, his gestures, and even his expressions. The nurse realized that her efforts were creating a genuine impact. Small steps taken with patience and care were transforming his life in ways he hadn't imagined possible. After returning to his apartment, she helped him prepare a simple lunch. As they ate, they talked about dreams and goals, both past and future. He shared stories of things he had once wanted to accomplish, but had abandoned due to setbacks. She listened intently, offering encouragement and reminding him that it was never too late to take small steps toward those goals. During their conversation, a small knock came at the door. A man in a neat suit and polite demeanor introduced himself as a family friend or associate of the man's, who had been informed about his situation. The nurse watched quietly as he explained that he had heard about the help she had been giving and wanted to meet the person who had made such a difference. The nurse was taken aback. She had never expected recognition or attention for her efforts. She had acted out of genuine care and compassion, never seeking rewards or acknowledgement. Yet here was someone who had noticed, someone who valued her dedication and wanted to thank her in a meaningful way. The visitor spoke warmly to the man and then turned to the nurse. "I've heard how much you've been helping. Your kindness and patience have truly made a difference. It's rare to find someone who gives so selflessly." The nurse smiled modestly. "I'm just doing what I believe is right. Helping others has always been my priority." He nodded, clearly impressed. "It's more than just helping. It's a reflection of your character. People like you don't come around often. The world needs more of this." For a moment, the nurse felt a strange mix of emotions: surprise, humility, and a quiet pride. She had never considered herself extraordinary. She had simply acted out of empathy and a desire to do good. Yet, hearing someone else acknowledge it made her realize that her small actions had larger consequences than she had imagined. The visitor continued, explaining that he and his family wanted to ensure that her efforts didn't go unnoticed or unrewarded. They discussed possible ways to support her, whether through job opportunities, financial assistance, or other means that could help stabilize her life while she continued her work. The nurse listened carefully, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She had never sought anything for herself, yet here was someone offering genuine help in return for her selfless actions. After the visitor left, the man turned to her with a look of deep appreciation. "You have no idea what this means to me," he said quietly. "Not just the help you've given, but the way you've treated me with respect and care. You've brought hope into my life when I didn't think it was possible." The nurse smiled softly, her heart warmed by his words. "I'm glad I could help. That's all I ever wanted, to make things a little easier for you." As evening approached, the nurse left his apartment and walked back to her own small home. The streets were alive with the sounds of the city winding down, families returning from work, and children playing in open spaces. She reflected on the day, thinking about the unexpected recognition she had received and the potential opportunities that might come from it. Yet she remained grounded. For her, the true reward was the positive change she had helped bring to someone's life. Back in her apartment, she prepared a modest dinner and thought about the path ahead. She had spent the day witnessing transformation, not just in the man she was helping but also within herself. The realization that her small acts of kindness had the power to influence others and even inspire recognition was both humbling and motivating. She decided to take out her notebook, the one she used to record her thoughts and reflections. Writing had always helped her process emotions and organize her plans. She wrote about the day, about the progress she had seen in the man, and about the unexpected visit that had changed her perspective. She noted down ideas for how she could continue helping, ways she could improve her own life, and how she might balance her personal struggles with her desire to care for others. As night fell and the city grew quiet, the nurse felt a sense of calm and anticipation. She knew that the recognition she had received was just the beginning. Life, she realized, often rewards those who give without expecting in return, but in its own time, in ways that can surpass imagination. Lying in bed, she reflected on the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Each moment had been filled with small acts of care, attention, and compassion. She felt grateful for the opportunity to make a difference, even as she navigated her own challenges. For her, kindness was not transactional. It was a choice, a reflection of values, and a source of personal fulfillment that no amount of hardship could diminish. As she drifted to sleep, she thought about the future, about the possibilities that might unfold. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she felt confident that her efforts and character had set in motion events that could change her life in unexpected ways. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope, not just for stability or security, but for the recognition, respect, and support that her dedication truly deserved. Her story was no longer just about struggle and perseverance. It was beginning to evolve into a tale of recognition, opportunity, and the way genuine kindness can ripple outward, touching lives in ways that go beyond immediate comprehension. She slept that night with a sense of quiet confidence, ready to face whatever the next day might hold, knowing that her small, selfless actions had already made a difference in the world. The next morning, the nurse woke up feeling the usual quiet anticipation in her small apartment. The city outside was slowly coming to life, the sounds of cars, birds, and early morning chatter filling the streets. She had no idea that today would be unlike any other, a day that would change her life in ways she had never imagined. She went about her morning routine, preparing a simple breakfast and packing her bag to visit the man she had been helping. Even after all the challenges she had faced, the loss of her job, the stress of bills, and the exhaustion from constant effort, she remained committed to her work. Helping him had become not only a responsibility but also a source of joy and fulfillment. When she arrived at his apartment, she found him waiting at the door, his eyes brighter than ever. "Good morning," he said with a genuine smile. "I feel stronger today. I think I'm really starting to recover." "That's wonderful," she replied, returning his smile. "I'm glad to see your progress. Today we'll keep building on it." They began with the usual routine: medications, hydration, and light exercises. She guided him carefully, ensuring he moved safely and maintained proper posture. She reminded him that recovery was not only about physical healing, but also about confidence and mental strength. As he followed her instructions, she noticed how much more independent he had become in just a few days. After their routine, she suggested a small walk outside to enjoy the fresh air. As they stepped onto the street, the sunlight warmed their faces and the sounds of the city seemed more vibrant than usual. The man's steps were confident and his expressions were lighter. He looked around, noticing details he had ignored before: the colors of flowers, the laughter of children playing, the cheerful greetings of neighbors. "It feels like I'm seeing the world for the first time in years," he said softly. "I didn't realize how much I had missed." The nurse smiled. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us to look around and appreciate the little things. Healing is more than medicine. It's noticing life and being present in it." After returning to his apartment, they prepared a simple lunch together. She encouraged him to participate fully, and they shared stories and laughter as they cooked. She asked about his dreams and aspirations, helping him feel hopeful about the future. He talked about things he had put aside long ago: hobbies, old plans, and ambitions, and she encouraged him to think about small steps he could take to pursue them again. As they finished lunch, a knock came at the door. The nurse exchanged a puzzled glance with the man. When he opened it, 4 cars parked outside could be seen through the window, luxury cars that gleamed in the sunlight. The man looked shocked, and so did the nurse. Standing at the door was a group of people she had never met before. They introduced themselves politely, explaining that they had learned about her dedication and kindness through the man's family. They had been deeply impressed by her selfless actions and had decided to show their appreciation in a very tangible way. The nurse was speechless. She had never expected recognition or reward for helping someone. She had acted purely out of empathy and care, never thinking that it would lead to such a moment. She watched as the visitors explained that the cars and other gifts were a way to honor her generosity and ensure her future security. "You've done something extraordinary," one of the visitors said. "Your kindness and dedication have made a real difference. We want to support you in any way we can, not just for today but for your future as well." The nurse could hardly believe her ears. She felt a mixture of shock, gratitude, and disbelief. Her heart raced as she realized that the very acts she had performed without expectation were now being acknowledged in a way she could never have imagined. The man she had helped looked at her with admiration and emotion. "You didn't ask for anything," he said softly. "You just gave your time, care, and energy. I don't know how to thank you enough. Seeing this today, I know that the world recognizes what a remarkable person you are." The nurse felt tears welling in her eyes. She had never sought fame or recognition, yet here it was, manifesting not as fleeting praise but as tangible support that could help her rebuild her life. She realized that her compassion had not gone unnoticed. It had reached the hearts of people who valued her humanity. The visitors explained that the luxury cars represented different opportunities. Some were symbolic gestures, while others were practical means to help her establish stability. They spoke about job opportunities, financial security, and ways to continue making a positive impact on others. Every word seemed surreal, yet she felt a deep sense of relief and hope. Despite the grandeur of the moment, the nurse remained humble. She thanked them sincerely, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never expected this," she said softly. "I was just trying to do what was right. I'm grateful more than I can express, but my hope has always been to help others. That's all I ever wanted." The visitors smiled, understanding her humility. They assured her that their gesture was meant to honor not just her actions, but the values she embodied: kindness, selflessness, and dedication. They emphasized that she could continue to help others, now with the security and resources she had been lacking. The man she had helped reached out and held her hand gently. "You've changed my life," he said. "I can never forget what you've done for me. Today, it's my turn to show the world how amazing you are. You deserve this and so much more." As the day went on, the nurse walked slowly through her neighborhood, her mind still processing the events. People in the street stopped to greet her with curiosity, asking about the cars parked outside and the unusual activity at her apartment. Neighbors whispered about the remarkable recognition she had received, and she realized that her story had begun to spread naturally, inspired by the authenticity of her actions. She reflected on her journey so far: the loss of her job, the financial struggle, the small acts of care she had performed for someone in need. All those days of dedication, effort, and quiet compassion had led to this moment. She realized that life had a way of rewarding selflessness, even if it did so in unexpected and extraordinary ways. That evening, she returned to her apartment, her heart full of gratitude and awe. The events of the day were still sinking in, but she felt an unshakable sense of peace. She had always believed that kindness mattered, that small gestures could have a big impact, and now she had witnessed the truth of that belief in her own life. She prepared a simple meal for herself, sitting quietly and reflecting on what had happened. The cars, the visitors, the recognition, it all seemed surreal, yet she felt grounded by her own values. She knew that her life had changed, but the core of who she was remained the same. She was still a person who cared deeply for others, who found joy in helping and supporting those in need, and who believed that empathy and compassion were the most important gifts one could offer the world. Before going to bed, she took out her notebook and wrote about the day's events. She recorded her feelings of surprise, gratitude, and hope. She also wrote about the lessons she had learned, that selflessness is never wasted, that acts of kindness can ripple far beyond what one can see, and that the universe sometimes finds remarkable ways to honor those who give freely. As she closed her notebook and lay down to sleep, she felt a quiet confidence. Her life had changed in ways she could not have predicted, yet she felt ready to embrace the future. She knew that the recognition and rewards she had received were not the ultimate goal. They were simply a reflection of the good she had already done. Her true reward was the knowledge that her actions had made a real difference, and that the world was capable of responding in equally meaningful ways. That night, she dreamed of a future filled with possibilities. She imagined helping more people, sharing her skills and compassion, and continuing to build a life of purpose and fulfillment. She felt ready to face any challenge, knowing that the kindness she gave would always find its way back to her, in ways both expected and extraordinary. The events of the day had proven something she had always believed deep in her heart: that true generosity, performed without expectation, can transform lives, not just the lives of those who receive it, but also the life of the giver. And as she drifted into a peaceful sleep, she knew that her journey was only beginning, that the ripple effect of her compassion had only just started to touch the world in ways she could not yet imagine. The morning sun streamed through the nurse's window, filling her small apartment with a warm glow. She woke with a sense of excitement, but it was quiet, steady, an inner calm that came from knowing her life was changing for the better. The events of the previous day still felt surreal. The luxury cars, the visitors, and the recognition for her selfless acts had been overwhelming, yet she felt grounded in her purpose. Helping others had always been her path, and now it seemed the world was finally supporting her in return. She prepared her morning tea slowly, savoring the quiet before the city fully woke. The streets outside were alive with their usual rhythm: people hurrying to work, shopkeepers arranging their stalls, and the hum of life filling the air. For a moment she just sat and reflected on her journey. Losing her job had been a dark and uncertain time, but she realized it had led her to something extraordinary, a chance to make a real difference in someone's life and, in return, to receive recognition that would help secure her own future. After breakfast, she set out to visit the man she had been helping. She walked briskly but calmly, her heart light, her mind focused on the day ahead. When she arrived, he was already waiting at the door, his face bright with a smile that made her heart swell. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I feel even stronger today. I can't believe how much progress I've made in just a few days." "That's wonderful to hear," she replied, smiling back. "I'm proud of your effort. Today we'll keep building on that strength." They began with the usual morning routine: medications, hydration, and gentle exercises. The man moved with more confidence now, his body responding well to her guidance. She reminded him to be patient with himself, to listen to his body, and to celebrate the small victories along the way. Healing, she knew, was a process that required both care and encouragement. After the exercises, they went through the bills and paperwork once again. Everything was now much more organized, but she guided him through a few new tasks, checking his appointments, scheduling follow-ups, and setting reminders for future medication doses. Each step built his confidence, making him feel capable and independent. She watched with quiet satisfaction as he learned to manage things on his own, knowing that true help meant empowering someone to stand on their own. By mid-morning, the nurse suggested a walk outside, this time to a nearby park where the man could enjoy the fresh air and see the world around him more fully. As they walked, she encouraged him to notice the small details: the color of the flowers blooming, the laughter of children playing, and the sound of birds singing.
"Life is made up of these small moments," she said softly.
"Noticing them can help us feel alive and hopeful." He nodded, taking in the surroundings with a renewed sense of awareness. "I feel like I've been living in a fog for years," he said. "Now everything seems brighter and I feel like I can breathe again." The nurse smiled, feeling a quiet joy in his words. She had always believed that kindness and care could change lives, but hearing it directly from him made the belief feel tangible and real. When they returned to the apartment, she helped him prepare a simple lunch. As they cooked together, they shared stories and laughter, creating a sense of connection that went beyond caregiver and patient. They talked about past experiences, dreams, and small hopes for the future. The man shared ideas he had long abandoned, and she encouraged him to consider taking small steps toward achieving them. Each suggestion, each gentle nudge helped him reclaim a sense of possibility in his life. After lunch, the man surprised her. He had prepared a small gift, a handmade token of appreciation. "You've done so much for me," he said softly. "I wanted to give you something to show my gratitude." The nurse accepted it humbly, touched by the gesture. "It's not necessary," she replied. "Helping you has been my reward. But thank you. This means a lot." The afternoon was calm and filled with productive activity. She helped him organize his apartment further, tidying areas that had been neglected and arranging things to make daily life smoother. Every small change made the apartment feel more like a home, a place of comfort rather than a space of stress. The man's confidence and independence continued to grow, and the nurse felt proud to see him regain control over his life. Then, in the late afternoon, she received a call that left her speechless. It was one of the visitors from the previous day, the person who had come with the group recognizing her kindness. They explained that they had been inspired by her dedication and wanted to discuss long-term opportunities to support her and amplify the good work she could do. She listened carefully, her heart racing. They spoke about financial support, career opportunities, and ways she could continue.